Live in 3, 2, 1. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Women of Aeronautics and Astronautics for our event today. We are so excited to have all of you here and even more excited to introduce all of our incredible speakers. So today's event is organized by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group of the Women of Aeronautics and Astronautics. The event is titled Celebrating Multidimensional Women Leaders in Aerospace, and we hope to learn more about our speakers' diverse experiences and how they fully own their multidimensional identities, both at work and outside of it. My name is Simran, and I work with the amazing Shireen Datta to organize events to promote diversity and cultivate belongingness and inclusion within the aerospace industry. I will also like to give a quick outline of the structure for our event today. So we will have 3 speakers give a brief talk about an aerospace related topic of their choice, and we'll come back together towards the end for a panel style discussion highlighting the multidimensional backgrounds that our speakers represent. So we will have Dr. Nora Patton go first. So if Dr. Patton is ready, I can start sharing my screen.
Yes, thank you very much, and hello everybody out there. Hopefully you can all hear me and see me okay. So it's my pleasure to join this panel tonight. I think it's something that's been very close to my heart for many years in terms of, making space accessible, the whole area of diversity and inclusion. And so I've put together a couple of slides to share with everybody to talk through specifically 2 initiatives that I've had the pleasure of running here in Ireland. And really, I want to highlight, I suppose, the role of commercial space in terms of it allowing access to the space station and to research on the space station, and just how valuable and important that is to emerging space nations like Ireland. And then I'll move on to the second programme, which again is a fabulous programme that is very close to my heart, and some amazing people I've had an opportunity to work with at the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. So I've called these slides Space as a Platform to Inspire, and hopefully you'll see why. So on the next slide, I have just a couple of pictures here. This is going back to a programme that I ran in Ireland in 2013 and 2014. And really this came about because I had been working at the International Space University, and I had an opportunity to meet and work with the founder and CEO of NanoRacks, which back in 2013, it was a very early years for NanoRacks in terms of its development and its creation. But seeing how it's evolved in the past, almost 10 years has just been phenomenal, with all of their payloads and everything that they've managed to do on the space station. It's just been amazing to watch this whole evolution of commercial space and the access that has brought all over the world, to industries, to students, to universities, to many, many people. So this project was called The Only Way Is Up, and we partnered with NanoRacks to send a student experiment to the International Space Station. And this at the time had never been done before in Ireland. So it was a big deal, I suppose, any of these things that happen for the first time, to open the doors for other people. It's just a great initiative to have been able to do. So we raised money from several different funding sources, and then we put a call out to students in Ireland and asked them to send us ideas for what research they would like to do on the International Space Station. And so here's a couple of pictures on this screen of some of the entries that we had. So we had a number of different entries from around Ireland. And then we ran the competition and we picked a winner. And then we had one experiment that actually went to space. So on the next slide, what we'll see is a picture of what the NanoRacks mix stick is. And it's a flexible tube. And I just think it's such a fantastic way and a fantastic experiment to do with the younger age groups, you know, elementary school, or, you know, the younger age groups, because it's a very simple experiment. It's a flexible tube that the students can put, you know, different components into, and you write your detailed outline for the astronaut on the space station to take the clamps off and to do whatever they need to do with the experiment once it gets to the space station. And so the winning experiment that we had selected back in 2014 was investigating reinforced cement and how that would set in space. And on the next slide, there's just a screen grab of the Orb-2 launch. So this was its launch to space back in 2014. And again, it's really goes to show, you know, you think of all of the commercial launches that have happened since then, and there's just been a phenomenal growth and a phenomenal interest and access to space and to opportunities in space. So it launched in July of 2014. It spent about 10 weeks on board the space station. And then the really cool thing with these experiments is that you actually get them back. So that the great thing for that experiment, it launched on the Orb-2, it flew back on SpaceX, which at the time in 2014 was just such a testament to commercial space. And so we'll go on to the next slide there. So that was one example, I suppose, of commercial space and its opportunities that it is opening up for many people across the globe. And we got some great results following on from that experiment. And the second experiment and opportunity, I suppose, I'd like to share is the Possum 13 initiative. And really this goes very much in line with diversity and inclusion, and all of us having some opportunity or some availability in what we do to actively open the door for other people. And particularly the younger generations, minority groups, you know, people that wouldn't necessarily have these opportunities that we have. And so we, in 2019, established what is called the Possum 13, and this is an initiative which stemmed out of Project Possum at the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. And really, you know, we came together as a group and we said, we're having some phenomenal opportunities here at Possum, and we'd really love to do something to give back and something to allow other people to get involved, and specifically young girls, to interest them and inspire them in the area of space science. So in 2019, we established the Possum 13 initiative, which essentially was a call for young teenagers, female teenagers, to allow them an opportunity to design experiments and have them flown on the microgravity flights that we do with in Canada with Possum. So just on the next slide then, what you'll see is this is one of the articles that was published following on from that initiative in 2019. This was pushed out to people all over the globe to submit ideas. And the really cool thing with this is that not only the experiment got to go, but there was a 16-year-old Colombian girl who actually got to go to Canada and fly on the microgravity flight with her experiment. So again, it's just looking at how each of us can participate in actively looking at projects and looking at opportunities that are there to open up the doors for others. And I just have to say, there's some phenomenal work going on at Project Possum, and a lot of volunteers, you know, give their time and really put in the hard work to try and make these initiatives happen. And I just think it's so fantastic. How fantastic for this 16-year-old Colombian girl to get to fly on a microgravity flight with her experiment. And so in parallel to the global initiative, on the next slide, you'll see in Ireland, I was able to run this initiative in Ireland when I was at the Irish Composite Centre in Limerick. So again, it was really through this partnership with Project Possum and the Possum 13. it was opening up the opportunity for girls to participate. So it was experiments either led by females, or they had to have at least two girls on their team to participate, really to try and get more girls hands-on experience in space science. And so we pushed this out across Ireland, opened up the opportunities and said, look, this is a really amazing opportunity to have your experiment tested on a microgravity flight. And so these were the 4 young students, teenagers from Dublin, whose experiment was selected to fly in 2019 on one of those flights. And so on the next slide, you'll see a picture of the experiment. And the great thing, I suppose, at the time, I was at the University of Limerick, so we had access to all of the labs and the technicians. And so we were able to work with the technicians and help them build their experiment. And their experiment focused on microgravity research for the distribution of water particles and how these would absorb in microgravity. So again, some great ideas from young people. And I think all of us have something that we can do to help open up, that opportunity that we would have loved to have had when we were their age. And so I have one last slide just to say thank you again. And that's just to give a very brief snapshot of what was possible in Ireland, really through partnerships, through networks, through people that you meet and know. And I just think there's lots of really cool platforms that we can use as those leverages these days. So thanks a million, and I'll pass it on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patton. That was very inspirational. I will start sharing the slides of Dr. Alexandra Stankovic. So give me a second here. All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And Dr. Patton, that was great to hear your talk. Thank you. Hello, it's great to be a part of this panel. Thanks again for having me here. My name is Sandra Stankovic. I'm a psychologist and human factors engineer, and I'm currently the director of the Human Performance Laboratory at the Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital. I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of the biggest challenges for maintaining astronaut health and performance in spaceflight. And along the way, I'll touch on what I think are the biggest open questions for this area, as well as some of the most exciting opportunities for innovation. So when we're thinking about these issues, the first thing we need to understand is the operational environment that astronauts are going to be working in and the constraints that we're designing for. To do this, we need to distinguish between the reality of spaceflight today and how spaceflight will be in the future. So if you look at this slide, spaceflight today looks a lot like this. These images were taken in the interior of the International Space Station. And as you can immediately notice, these are pretty cramped, confined, isolated spaces. And there are generally 6 people at any time on the ISS, spending an average of 6 months to maybe up to a year living, working, exercising, eating, sleeping, everything, all in this small interior space that's roughly equivalent to the inside of a Boeing 747. Current spacecraft are generally designed for function, not for long-term comfort. So as living and working environments, over time, these spaces can become restrictive and monotonous. There's not a lot of privacy, there's not much variation in terms of sensory exposure, and this can have implications for health, performance, and psychological well-being. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. This is kind of what spaceflight in the future might look like. It's a lot different. Today, we're spending most of our time in low Earth orbit, but in the future, we'll be exploring the inner solar system with destinations like the Moon, Mars, and nearby asteroids. So teams will be spending longer intervals in space, maybe in the order of years, traveling much further than we've ever gone before. Today, we're performing tightly coupled operations and communicating constantly in real time with mission controllers and medical support staff. If a critical event occurs, an emergency evacuation from the ISS can have astronauts back on the ground within 3.5 hours. But we won't have those kind of options in the future. In fact, crews will have to be operating much more autonomously. In Mars operation scenarios, we'll be looking at communication latencies between 4 and 24 minutes each way. So astronauts won't be able to consult readily with the ground when issues come up. and will have to resolve problems on their own. This will have a lot of implications in terms of how we approach medical monitoring for crew health and performance, and the kind of strategies we develop for recognizing warning signs and deploying health countermeasures. So when we think about future spaceflight operations and what they look like, there's really three clusters of questions we need to consider: who, what, and how. The who centers on the type of future spacegoers that we'll be designing for. To date, we've mostly just been thinking about professional astronauts. These folks have extensive training and deep technical backgrounds. They often have a lot of operational experience, and they have to meet very rigorous medical standards. So when we're talking about designing systems and hardware and procedures for these kind of folks, that's very different from the needs of, say, a space tourist or maybe a future commercial operator that will have an assigned maintenance role on a spacecraft. We haven't really figured out yet what we'll need to do to screen these new kinds of spacegoers to determine their fitness for spaceflight, or even what the medical criteria for general space travelers will be. We'll have to figure out how to train them and what kind of support systems they'll need to operate safely and effectively. A lot of this uncertainty comes from that second set of questions, the what. What exactly are all these future space flyers going to be doing in space? We've got a pretty good idea about the kind of tasks astronauts need to perform on the ISS and on spacewalks today. But what are the specific tasks that will be necessary for future long duration space exploration? And how do we even start to decompose some of the existing future exploration architectures into concrete activities that humans will perform? These will range from new types of science to maintenance of vehicles and systems that we haven't even designed yet, to surface exploration activities, and even large-scale complex construction projects on the moon or other planetary bodies. Once we understand what these tasks are, we can start to think about how to most effectively support them. That will involve things like coming up with new training procedures and improving teaming, not just between people, but between humans and robotic and autonomous aids. We will need to understand what kind of tools and hardware will be necessary for future spaceflight tasks, and design new human system interfaces. And this will involve a lot of new technologies for monitoring and tracking health and performance, and developing new procedures for how and when to provide the most effective health intervention, from early detection of symptom onset to things like timely and accurate health information for crew members. Once we have a better understanding of future spaceflight operations and the need for tracking health and performance, the next big thing that we'll need to figure out is what exactly we're going to track. What are the right signatures to be measuring, and how can we make sure that they're actually measuring what we think they're measuring? The first thing that we will need to know is what are the big ticket medical obstacles that future astronauts will face. Fortunately, we have a lot of data from decades of human spaceflight to draw from, and we have a pretty good understanding of the health and performance implications of exposure to microgravity and the conditions of spaceflight. So if you go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So the NASA Human Research Program has identified the biggest risks to crew health and performance. These risks present the highest level threats to safety and success in long duration space travel, and give us the best indication of what kinds of markers of health and performance are the biggest priorities for tracking. At the top, of course, is radiation exposure. Excuse me. And this is going to become even more crucial as we move into longer duration exploration. But things like behavioral health and team functioning are also among the top 10 risks. So markers of things like stress, fatigue, depression, and group cohesion are all going to be very important. And these can be pretty tough to operationalize and monitor through physiological signals alone. Additional areas, of course, are bone and muscle loss, sleep disturbance, neurovestibular adaptation to gravity transitions, cardiovascular system impacts, and vision and ocular changes. There are lots of established physiological and metabolic signatures that we can leverage, but we need operational validation of these measures through ground-based medical research to ensure that they really are assessing the dimensions that we're using them as a proxy for. That validation is going to be extremely important for the next big question. How do we make sense of all of this data that we're collecting? How do we develop accurate baselines and standards that we can use to track change and provide timely alerts for early warning and medical intervention? And how can we best leverage these data to make accurate predictions about future health and performance? And while we do have extensive literature on many of the health issues surrounding human spaceflight, there's a lot that we still don't know in terms of maximum exposure values or the mapping of particular change rates to actual operational and performance outcomes. So there's a lot of biomedical research that is still necessary for us to be able to establish guidelines and standards. This brings us to the question of how we can best feed back these data to crew members and their support teams. What kind of displays are most effective? Exactly how do we present these data and when? Is it change rates or continuous tracking or only notifications when specific thresholds are crossed? There are also procedural issues at play of when and to whom do we provide these warnings about change and health and performance, and then what do we do in response to these data? If you could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. There's also some really exciting opportunities here for integration with existing and future systems like helmet heads-up displays, wearable computers, student integration, and habitat screens. First and foremost, this information needs to be timely in its presentation, but also generally unobtrusive, meaning that it can't impact normal operations or distract crew members' attention when things aren't nominal. So a strong understanding of optimal human-machine interface is going to be critical here, as we consider the best modalities for presenting the right information to the right person at the right time. So to summarize, I'll leave you with some key takeaways of what we've been thinking about so far. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your ideas about this in the future. Like we've talked about, spaceflight is a high-risk, dynamic operational activity with many challenges for preserving astronaut health and performance, and for ensuring mission safety and success. And spaceflight operations will only become more complex and autonomous as we develop new commercial concepts and move on to further and further exploration targets. From the perspective of maintaining crew health and performance in spaceflight, today and in the future, the biggest need we have is for persistent, unobtrusive monitoring of established, validated signatures in meaningful, interpretable ways that can be leveraged for timely and accurate interventions. For this, we're going to need to address three big gaps: capturing the right operationally relevant signals, tracking change to make accurate predictions, and effectively interpreting and presenting these data. So those are some of the biggest challenges remaining, and research in this field, I think, will also have relevance to a lot of earthbound population medicine needs too, like the tracking of chronic disease, behavioral health management, and medical care delivery in remote communities. Thank you so much for your attention. I welcome any questions later on, and I look forward to hearing all of your ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stankovic. Thank you for highlighting the intersectionality between human factors and aerospace. Achieving a space mission is definitely multidimensional. So thank you so much. So last but definitely not the least, we have our third speaker, Anna Kominik. So I will start sharing her presentation.
Hi, everybody. It's a real privilege to be joining you from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm the Asia Pacific Director for Wisk. So we are very much in a space, and we're developing one of the world's first self-flying all-electric air taxis. We're a joint venture between the Boeing Company and Kitty Hawk Corporation in California. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about that race for inner space and the interaction between diversity and introducing new technology to our communities and our customers. Next slide, please, Simran. But before diving into the topic, I thought I'd give you a little bit of an oversight of what we're actually producing, because it's kind of important for what we're going to talk about a little bit later. So we've been working for more than 10 years in the United States and 4 years in New Zealand. And our mission is to deliver safe everyday flight for everyone. So accessibility is one of our core parts of our vision. So everybody being able to access new technology like this in an electric aviation world. So this aircraft we've called Cora. She's a 5th generation aircraft. We've now logged about 1,500 test flights on our full scale aircraft across our 2 sites in the United States and New Zealand. And we're really working hard, not just on the aircraft, but also on the wider ecosystem, that regulatory environment, the environment which allows the pipeline of talent, and also about, you know, how communities react to this new technology. So if you see the vehicle on the screen, she has 12 lift fans that create a vertical lift, and then a push prop at the back, which provides the forward momentum once she's actually reached altitude. She has autonomous avionics and that software removal actually, and the software, and that removes the whole capacity for human error. So this is a very, very new technology. Next slide, Simran. But as all of you who are out there who are in development of any sort, whether it be in aviation or in space, the development process is always a long one, and we've had 11 years of development. And you can see some of the prototypes there. Each one has been essentially testing a new development or technology, piloted, remotely piloted, subscale, full scale across the whole range. Next slide. So when you're talking about bringing a new technology like an electric aircraft to the market, let alone one that is electric vertical takeoff and landing, there's a whole lot of aspects that you have to think about. And we call these the 5 pillars. And so it's really excited to get excited about that really easy to get excited about the potential for the technology we're creating. But when we're looking at enabling advanced air mobility and remotely piloted aircraft systems into our communities and into our airspace environment, it's just so much more than just an aircraft or a system to think about. So we've been on this journey for more than a decade, and we're really starting to really get to grips with what it means to actually integrate a new technology into a system that's already established and the things that we need to do. So what you can see is we've got the aircraft on one side, but we've also got to have somewhere to fly. So the airspace, when you don't have a pilot on board, you need to have a whole lot of systems. They all have to be certified. You've got a whole lot of complexity around that. You've got existing users and their own perceptions of their ownership of that space. And then you've got your operations, your infrastructure, how does that actually impact on urban planning, and then also your engagement with the communities. So airspace integration is one of the big issues, but engagement for us and the communities that we're working with are a really important part of what we're actually achieving here. Next slide, please. So that really brings us to what I'd like to talk to you about today, which is really how do we as engineers and aviation enthusiasts and managers and leaders actually create an environment in which new technology is not only accepted by our communities, but how that actual acceptance also informs our own development of those products and how it actually informs the way we operate them and where we operate them. So throughout our process, we have been taking an ecosystem approach, as I referred to previously. And we understand that our mission is not only to build the aircraft that flies people around safely, but also to work with the communities, businesses, and government leaders on how to best shape that new environment. So commercialization and social license are inextricably linked. But even more than that, diversity is like one of the things that underpins all of it, because without diversity, our companies can't speak to our communities, and our communities can't reflect back into our companies. So if you think about engineering for our communities and our customers, in an engineering culture, we're often focused on how an engineering is solving a problem or a challenge, especially through those technological solutions. But at the heart of it is actually the communities that we are actually developing for and the customers we are developing for, not just on whether they like the product, but also how they want it to operate. So, you'll hear a lot in the advanced air mobility space about noise, safety, air pollution, but it can also be how does this aircraft support minorities and hard to reach communities to actually access the economy and their opportunities more effectively. And so some of the work that we have been doing in New Zealand and now in other jurisdictions has been really focusing on the social impact of our new technology. How can we make that as accessible as possible, as quickly as possible? As those of you who have probably looked at innovation cycles. Often they'll start off at the high end of a market. We'd like to see that high end actually being more broad, being as broad within the community as possible. So it's not just about price, it's also about where are we locating vertiports, vertipads, how is it actually impacting, how are we contributing to public transport, how are we contributing to jobs, how are we contributing to well-being, and how does that interaction between innovation and well-being really work for our communities. Now, one of the things that I am passionate about, as Simran knows, is diversity. And, diversity is a huge ingredient in the success of a company to actually achieve that interaction between community and engineering. We know that diversity in our companies build better products and more sustainable businesses. It's also what fosters innovations and opens us to new ideas. So we know that equitable employers outpace their competition by respecting the unique needs and perspectives and potential of all team members. But we also see it every day in our own company at Wisk and how we're actually interacting with our communities and our customers of the future. So, if you think about it practically, how can we as an aviation or tech company understand the desires and wants and concerns of our future customers and communities if we're not reflective of that community? So having a workforce that reflects the community is one core pillar in actually achieving that interaction between engineering and customers and community. And then there is also this building the social acceptance. We in New Zealand have been working with the Māori tribe, Ngāi Tahu, which is actually prominent in the area where we're testing. We've been doing some really big programs around creating pipelines of talent, but also about how to actually nurture the need and the desire for actually entering into STEM subjects, and then monitoring those kids as they're going through the system to ensure that actually when we have a job out there, that we see some of them actually applying for it. So we know that with minorities, it's not just a case of encouragement, it's not even just a case of mentoring. For some kids who are out there, just the prospect or the dream of being able to be part of a space company or an advanced aviation company is just beyond their experience, and just moving away from home, moving away from their families can seem like something that is just an insurmountable challenge. So what we've been doing is actually creating connections, like real connections with those young people. Before COVID, they would visit our facility in California, a group of young STEM leaders, and they would also be visiting us in New Zealand. So what we've done is we've extended what we call in New Zealand whānau or family out to those kids, and they are now part of our family. They're part of the Wisk family, and they have a sense of connection. So that thought of actually going to a university in New Zealand, or even dreaming of going to a university in the US, has suddenly become much more real to them. So I guess we haven't got a lot of time, but one of the things I'd just like to really emphasize is that diversity and inclusion is not just a tick box. At Wisk, we understand and experience every day the huge benefits that diversity and inclusion brings to how we're developing, what we're developing, and how we're interacting with our communities. And it really does have that inside out impact. Our ability as a company to listen, navigate differences, and build on commonality are really important qualities when we are building a completely new technology and saying to the world, hey, here, this is what we've got, we think you'll like it. So look forward to the rest of the conversation with the panel. Thanks so much.
Awesome, Anna. Thank you so much for bringing light into why the focus on communities and inclusion is so important for creating engineering solutions that are not only functional, but meaningful for the society. So that was very inspirational. Thank you for all of the three speakers for your time and your words. We will switch into a panel style discussion now. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and then I will hand this over to Shireen to moderate the panel. But thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from all of you.
Thank you so much, Simran. And just to echo her thoughts, thank you for all these lovely presentations. I love seeing how diverse all of these topics and your backgrounds were. So the first question I have for everyone today is, besides the work you've spoken about today, can you tell us about one or two of your other passions? And in doing so, we would love to hear your thoughts on why it's important for you to be a multidimensional individual, even when your career or your work becomes overwhelming, or when you're tempted to dedicate all your time to it because you love it so much. So anyone can feel free to start. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure, will I go first?
Yeah, you go first, Nora.
We'll stick in the order of the presentations then. Yeah, thank you. Great. I really enjoyed the presentations, well, Andrea and Sandra. So yeah, I think for me, I know it still probably aligns with work, but the programs that I get to do with Project Possum, the polar suborbital science in the upper mesosphere, I absolutely love participating in those, the hands-on side of suborbital spaceflight and research. And I think it very much feeds into the multidimensional me, in terms of it's a very international team we get to work with. So the people, the mentors, the people training us have such diverse backgrounds and such amazing careers behind them. So we get to learn an awful lot on those programs, and we get to work with really incredible people. So I think for me, that's been a real important part of what I've been doing the last few years. Now, obviously with COVID, those programs have been on hold, but it's great to see them back up and running. So yeah, I think for me that would be one massive, important part to what I do.
Thanks. So I'll chime in. One of the things I found most energizing is working with students. I love chances to do community outreach events or to mentor other either younger people or my peers. I know for me in my career and in my life in general, mentorship and friendships have just been so important and such a big factor for the successes I've had, and also for kind of building resilience to deal with things when they don't really go quite the way you've hoped. So that kind of community engagement and community building I find so important. And it's just kind of an extension of really feeling that community.
Yeah, I've got sort of two parts to the question actually, and which probably reflects the multidimensional side. I have my family who are really, really important. I have 4 children, a blended family, so we're aged between 15 and 20, so that's very grounding on a daily basis. And that is a big part of who I am. And I actually bring that to work, right? So, and I encourage my staff and my team and actually within the company to actually speak to who they are as a person, mother, wife, partner, whoever, whatever. I think that's a really important part of bringing that dimension to your work. I also have a deep love of the arts. So I sit on an arts board in New Zealand. We set up a Festival of the Arts, which was international, not so international at the moment, but hopefully we'll get there. But actually what that has also done is we have pivoted to a very clear focus on Indigenous art this year because we can't bring people in. So that has had a real silver lining in the fact that the New Zealand, the Aotearoa voice is starting to really, be promoted as a result of some of the constraints that we are experiencing. So that's fabulous. And then the other thing that I really like, I'm very passionate about is systemic change. And so that also comes to my work. I sit on a board that is addressing issues of child poverty in New Zealand. And so that is something that I am very deeply passionate about, is that the changes we make stick, they're not just a ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, that we're actually creating things that actually create a real difference for years to come. And I may not see them within my time at a company or in an organization, but they are there and they will be there for a long time.
Thank you so much for all your answers. It's lovely to hear kind of all of the diversity of backgrounds and passions that you all have. And that's one of the main reasons we wanted to organize this panel, is because as minority genders or of minority backgrounds, we often feel like we focus always on our work or on our achievements, and we don't always get asked about what we do in our limited free time. So thank you for all of your answers. A related question is kind of moving to the concept of intersectionality and of all the identities that everyone has. So among the three of you, we have a lot of identities, for example, engineer, scientist, teacher, people manager, advisor, and public speaker. And obviously these are in addition to being from three very different cultural backgrounds. So we would love to ask you, how do all of these identities and experiences come together to make you an effective leader? So an example from my side would be, I've grown up across multiple cultures, so this has enabled me to understand and collaborate with a really wide range of personalities. So we would love to hear kind of one or two qualities that you think your identities have given you to be an effective leader.
Yeah, so I think on that, I think of my time at the International Space University, and I've had the pleasure of chairing different departments and working on team projects and things like that. And it's a very interdisciplinary, international team of people. You know, there's people from all over the world, different backgrounds, and it really, it's this collection of people with a love for space and who want to learn more about space, but from very different, diverse backgrounds and cultures and histories and lots of those kinds of things. So definitely for me, you know, I grew up and I live in Ireland, and having that international experience just to understand, I suppose, different cultures and how we, you know, react differently to different situations. And we do bring our own cultures and our own backgrounds and our own upbringings and all of these things into work and to life. So I think that for me was a really important step to go to the Space Studies program in 2010. It taught me a lot more about myself. It wasn't just to learn about, I didn't just learn about space, like I really got to understand, you know, the different cultures and how do you interact with people and things like that. So that's been, I think, very, very eye-opening the past kind of 10 years being part of that program and learning those aspects to myself.
I think I'll echo something that Anna mentioned in her last answer about kind of bringing your full self to work or to really any interaction that you're in. One of the things I really strive for is just authenticity and connections to really be myself as much as I can be, and to kind of be curious and introspective about, you know, what things about me or what kind of elements of my personality or my background are influencing the way I may feel in a situation or a decision I might be bringing, and to kind of foreground that curiosity also in the way that I interact with other people. So I think it is important to connect to each other as human beings, even in a workplace environment, and to, you know, really get to know each other. So to the spirit of the first question, to, you know, ask people about their weekend and, you know, understand what where people are from and what kind of things they like and what do you do in your spare time. So really just that fostering that curiosity, I think that builds an empathy and a connection in a team that can be really valuable in pretty much any situation.
Yeah, and picking up on Sandra's point, I'm a passionate advocate for curiosity. As Sandra said, I think that actually overcomes quite a few issues initially, and then underpinning that with respect and building that into teams. And I think then the other one that I think is really important is actually vulnerability, and it's actually being able to say, you know, I don't know. And that's really hard in an engineering culture. Because we're meant to know, or we're meant to be figuring it out. So to actually enable teams to say, I don't know what I don't know, and I need to work that out, and can you help me? I think if you can achieve that, then you start to get towards what I was talking about in my team of actually what else do we not know about how this technology or this approach is actually going to impact out there in the real world.
Thank you so much for your answers. And I love that you mentioned vulnerability, curiosity. I think normally leadership has certain words associated with it, which can be, you know, like teamwork, or it can be being able to delegate work. But these kind of more, I guess, qualitative qualities don't always come up. So thank you for mentioning those. What Anna said at the end kind of leaves us in a good place to move to one of the other questions we had, which is oftentimes in the workplace, especially where women or other gender minorities are obviously not the dominant demographic, we are applauded and recognized not only for our quality of our work, but for being the first woman or some of the few women to accomplish something. And we wanted to know, in your opinion, can this often translate into kind of an added pressure on us and other minority genders, because we feel like we won't be recognized unless we're doing something extraordinary, or if we're constantly standing out. So have you ever faced this struggle in all of your years of experience, and how do you kind of work through it and tell yourself that it's okay to not always be extraordinary, that you still belong there?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question to ask ourselves, you know, where does this pressure actually come from? Because I absolutely think, and I felt it myself, and I know of other people who have felt that pressure, you know, because of the place that they're in and what they're working towards. And, you know, maybe it is to do the first of something or be the first of something. And I can understand, you know, where that pressure comes from, because, you know, it hasn't been done before, and you know that there's eyes going to be looking on you as you're doing this. But equally, what I've thought about this over the years, and I think if we can change the mindset around it to it becoming something more positive, in terms of maybe we can look at it as a platform to create conversation. So I was thinking, you know, about the first all-female spacewalk, for example. You know, it was just a great conversation to have around all of the women that had gone before them and all of the people that had gone before them to allow that to happen. But also, what do you want to achieve post this happening? So I think, yes, absolutely. I have felt it myself at times, you know, that pressure. But equally, I think if we can just change our mindset and think, you know what, we have an opportunity here to use this first, or this, you know, new, or this, you know, breaking whatever barrier it is as a conversation starter, and really to try and use that as a springboard to something a lot bigger. So it's not just about that one event, it has to be, you know, a lot bigger. Yeah, so that's my perspective on that.
I love those ideas, Nora. It makes me reflect on kind of feeling like I'm part of a continuity. So, you know, even though there are these big firsts that are happening, that you are wherever you are because, you know, someone came ahead of you, and hopefully you're going to help kind of widen that path and push it in a new direction for somebody else. So thinking about that really, for me, foregrounds just wanting to lift other people up. So making sure that, you know, if you get a little farther along, make sure you're bringing somebody with you. Make sure that you're offering yourself as a mentor to other people, and really look ahead of you and see, you know, who might have forged the path that you're on and who might be a good mentor to you. So reach out, form those connections, you know, make sure that you're engaged in that dialogue. And to Anna's point before, that you're asking for help, it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to always have it figured out. And it's also okay to fail. I think we're very much in this culture of, you know, failure is not an option. You hear that a lot in the NASA world. But what's wrong with failure? I mean, sometimes sometimes there's safety reasons, sometimes there's mission constraints. You don't always want to fail, but when it's safe, when you're in a nurturing environment, try something hard. And if it doesn't work, learn from that. And again, just work with your team, lift each other up, and reach out to great mentors.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Both Nora and Sandra put it so eloquently. I think for me, and I'm probably a couple of cohorts before everybody else in this call. So when I first started in my career, there was a real sense of being the other, even from just being the only woman in a room, or, the first woman, or whatever it was. That sense of other was quite palpable for me. Anyway, I could feel it. And having now been in governance situations where I've been able to bring more women onto boards, I see the difference in the conversation and the way we make decisions, and the sustainability of the organization you're working with. So the female voice is a really important thing. Minority voices are really, really important around tables, whether it's executive teams or boards or whatever, or in teams. I really love that point from Nora around the vision. It needs to, I have worked for, leaders who have wanted to be first in something, and they haven't really worked out why they wanted to be first. They just wanted to be first. The podium finish is just part of it, as Nora has so well put. You really need, as a leader, or as if you are going for something, then make sure you know why you want that and what you want the difference to be as a result of you being there. That is part of that responsibility of being first. And then at the failure point, my best learnings have been from the things that I have really stuffed up on. So they've been the things that I tried, failed, or I made a decision and it probably in retrospect wasn't. But at the time, I learned so much about myself, about my environment. So don't be afraid of decisions. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I think there's a much kinder, even though it doesn't always feel like it, there's a lot more women around. So, we're here to hold you, to catch you, and to make sure that you get lifted up again. Don't feel you're alone. I think that's the other thing that can be hard, is that sense of being alone. Make sure you're not. Don't feel that you're not.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm sure Simran agrees with this, but it's incredibly comforting and inspiring to know that there are trailblazers like you all ahead of us, and both of us and everyone else who's kind of in our cohort, as Anna would say, can't wait to do even more inspirational things like you all have done. So transitioning into the last question, and I think this question might have been partly answered by the last 30 minutes, but so this event is the week before IAC, the International Astronautical Congress, which is arguably the largest and most diverse space conference on Earth. So we want to ask, do you have any advice for making the most out of spaces that can be overwhelming, especially for minorities? So I personally have not been to IAC, but from what I hear, it can be pretty intimidating. So, if you have anecdotes or kind of just general advice of how to navigate feelings of intimidation or imposter syndrome, lack of confidence, any examples from your career where you might have felt like that and navigated out of it and gotten something really good out of an event like a conference or something similar?
Yeah, in terms of the advice for the likes of, going to IAC, honestly, I don't know. I'll say I don't really know what the magic formula is. As you say, it's a huge conference. It's an amazing conference. But when I've gone there myself, I've known people. So I've had that network, of people. So it's very hard, to go into a big space and a big conference and not know people. So maybe, go to the booths and strike up conversations. But in terms of the imposter syndrome and those insecurities, I just loved what Anna was saying in terms of the mentors and the people that you can surround yourself with for that support. I suppose when you're in that situation, to have somebody who's kind of gone through a similar situation, that you can just pick their brain for advice, guidance, you know, they've probably hit the same walls that you would encounter in your own situation. So I think, like, over the years, I've had some amazing mentors, like both male and female, and they've really helped me through those times where I felt I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, or, you know, that whole thing around failure. Oh, well, I'm one of a few girls here, so I can't fail. Of course you can. And as Anna said, it's through the failings that you really learn a lot, you know, not just about the technical side, but also about yourself and how to troubleshoot things and deal with conflict and different things like that. So I definitely think, you know, having someone who's gone before in a similar situation for advice is really, really important in those situations.
Thanks for that. One of the themes I love that's emerging from this conversation is, you know, reinforcing this idea that you're not alone. I know I personally, I'm a shy person, so I really struggle with these like big format conferences, particularly where you have to introduce yourself to someone that you don't know, or maybe there's a lot of people standing around talking. It's hard to jump in, and it's just so comforting for me to, you know, hear from other people that, you know, they're nervous too, and it's hard to break into conversations. It's hard to kind of find your way in a big environment. And I love that we're being, you know, really open about that vulnerability of just, you know, it's okay to be that way. And I think we all share that in common. And finding those points of intersection with people and being open to exploring commonalities, I think is a nice way to bridge those, what can sometimes feel like a huge gulf when you're in a new situation. So I know at conferences for me, sometimes I'll go to some of the coffee sessions or to some of the booths or to sessions that are a little bit more informal or are structured around something I'm particularly interested in. So, you know, I'm a psychologist, so I like to go to some of the more human factors oriented sessions. And when you're in a room like that, you're already guaranteed that everybody else that's in that room likes that topic or is interested in it. So you've already got, you know, some common grounding, and you've got something you can start a conversation about and you know, continue again to tap into that curiosity and find ways to connect with people.
Yeah, that's great advice, Sandra. And I think I've when I first started out, I found it really hard at conferences to actually talk to people. So often I'd use that breakout, you know, opportunity of having been in a smaller group, heard a few people talk and talking to them at the coffee break. So sort of breaking the ice with the people, that rather than cold calling straight up. The other one is, I always say to my staff, hunt in a pack, get a friend, go and bowl up to somebody. And also, please, I see it so often, everybody races to the speakers. Often the most golden people are the ones that are just standing there. Or if you see somebody who's standing by themselves, bowl up to them. Often you'll find is that, you know, you'll actually create a group around you. So I think the thing for me is to embrace your insecurities and lean into opportunity. It sounds really twee, but, you know, too often women hold themselves back. You know, we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not qualified enough. Same goes with jobs. If you've got 60% of the skills, I want to hear from you, right? You can guarantee your male colleagues will be faking it till they make it. So, you know, get in there. You know, you can learn on the job. That's what we want to see. You don't have to have 100% of the skills. And that's exactly the same in whatever opportunity you have. You are good enough. You're amazing. We want to hear your voice. We need to hear your voice. Only through that are we going to actually create technologies and opportunities, whether it's space, inner space, wherever it is, that are actually real to that future that humans need. You know, that decarbonized future, that future where our grandkids can have many of the opportunities that we have had. It's so important that you speak up and feel that you can speak up. So the other one is LinkedIn. I think it's fabulous. I have so many people just ping me. I'm really happy to just, you know, probably get an onslaught, but, you know, just to have email conversations, you know, and sometimes that's a little less jarring for people, or a little less scary. is just to ping a DM to somebody that you like or would like to get some advice from. So yeah, reach out and believe in yourselves.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. We're on the hour, so we'll be finishing up now. I just wanted to say thank you so much to all three of our speakers for joining us. At the Women of Aeronautics and Astronautics, our mission is to build a welcoming and supportive space for women and gender minorities. And by being here today and speaking on the panel, you've really contributed to that. So thank you for doing that. Thank you also for taking up space everywhere that you do and for inspiring other people to do the same. And yeah, unless anyone has any questions, or Simran, if you have anything else you would like to ask, we will end this here today. This link will be available to watch in the near and far future, hopefully. Yeah, so thank you very much.
And thank you to Nora and Sandra. It's been so great to meet you online, and Shireen and Simran for organising this. It's been great fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Have
so
a great
much.
day, everyone.
Have a
See
lovely
you.
day.
Bye.